And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
All right, we're back. Cover 1, the NFL Draft Podcast. I'm Russell Brown, as always. Joining me, CP Christian Page. CP, how we doing, my man?
I'm doing good. Glad it's Friday. Big
Yes.
weekend of football tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, there's going to be a ton of good games. Oklahoma, Baylor. Baylor, surprisingly, 9-0, ranked 13th in the country. They've got the best Big 12 defense that there is right now. They're ranked number 1. So that's going to be a good football game. I really think it's going to be a game that shows, Denzel Mims, the wide receiver from Baylor. We'll see what he can do. We'll see Gallimore from Oklahoma, their defensive lineman, as well as Kenneth Murray. We'll also see Jalen Hurts, CeeDee Lamb. Creed Humphrey, even a guy that you're really high on. Will you be watching this game?
Probably. I forget what time it comes on. Is it the afternoon game?
7:30 p.m.
Okay, yeah, I should be. I'll be in the stadium for the Auburn-Georgia game, but after I come out of there, I'll get my eyes on this game. But yeah, this is the game just from a committee standpoint, the college football committee standpoint. This is the make or break for Baylor because they're getting, I don't want to say disrespected in a sense. I know they haven't had a great strength of schedule, and even with a lower strength of schedule, they haven't really blown anybody out of the waters. Last week playing an okay TCU, going into overtime and defeating them. But I think Baylor, obviously, if they get a win over here over Oklahoma, who, even though they have that one loss to Kansas State, Baylor's definitely in the driver's seat, and definitely a lot of noise can be made this week as far as those top 4 teams go in the playoff rankings.
Yeah, and I just don't feel like the committee values the Big 12 at all unless you're undefeated. And I guess rightfully so. The Big 12 is not great by any means, but Baylor is undefeated. So we'll see. And I think this is a way for them to put themselves in the top 10. We've also got Minnesota versus Iowa. That will be a good football game, number 8 versus number 20. I know Big Ten football is not exciting, but Minnesota has some players. We'll talk briefly about them in a little while when we talk some quarterbacks. Tanner Morgan is certainly a quarterback to pay attention to for them, even though I don't think we'll see him in the 2020 NFL Draft. But you mentioned Georgia, Auburn. You'll be at this game. It's at Auburn. Auburn's ranked 12th in the country. Georgia's ranked 4th in the country. There's no way Georgia is one of the 4 best teams in the country, right?
I don't think so, because their offense isn't as dynamic as it has been in years past, because there's just not a steady passing game.
No.
They went up to Kentucky a couple weeks ago and won the football game with Jake Fromm having 35 passing yards. And that's not a recipe. If you're struggling against a Kentucky defense, which, no disrespect to Mark Stoops, he has that defense really good every single year. But Auburn's one of the better defensive teams in all of college football. So coming into Jordan-Hare Stadium, it's going to be a tough time for Georgia. But, if they get this win, they get on the road, it's always a scrappy matchup. It doesn't matter what the records are between these 2 teams. Then Georgia has a little bit of validity with that 4th spot. But I just think down the road with their strength of schedule, with everybody's strength of schedules factored in, even with, just having one loss, and they're going to have to win the SEC championship, in my mind, to get to the college football playoff, because I just don't think their strength of record is that good. And, when you have a loss to South Carolina, who's, I think, right around 500 right now, that's definitely not a good look when you're being compared to, teams like Alabama, even though their strength of schedule isn't anything spectacular, but their one loss comes to the best team in college football. So I think Georgia's on the outside looking in as far as playoff goes. Just this week they happen to come in at number 4 just because of who lost in front of them.
Right. And they definitely showed their hand. I think that, the playoff committee, I think they showed their hand in saying, hey, we're putting Alabama at 5. They're essentially in. We know Georgia's a fraud, and we know Georgia's going to get trounced by LSU in the SEC championship game. And I think that's what everybody's thinking. I'm not going to write Auburn out of this game. I think Auburn's going to compete. I think Auburn's got a shot to win. I think certainly it's up to Bo Nix what he can do as the quarterback of this team, and he's got to, not turn the football over. He's got to be efficient. He's got to make sure that if he is checking down, are you checking down on 3rd and 13, or are you checking down on like 3rd and 3, and you're letting the guy create after the catch to get that first down or something? So I'm excited for this game after the Michigan State game, which obviously will be the game I'm paying attention to the most because it's the rivalry game in the state that I live in. I don't expect Michigan State to win. I hope for a strong performance from Mark D'Antonio and his team, just simply because I do think this is his last season for the Spartans. So we'll see what happens. But, Michigan, what can they do with their defense? Lavert Hill, certainly a player to watch out of their secondary. Shea Patterson, we know he's garbage. He's absolute trash. Michigan State, though, they got Raekwon Williams. He's just a beefy defensive tackle that can play 1 technique, 3 technique. Joe Bacci is not playing. He, is suspended because of PEDs. So there's not a whole lot for Michigan State. Brian Lewerke's not very good. He seems to not be able to stay healthy. He has struggled with concussions as well. So we'll see how that game plays out. But at nighttime, the late night games, UCLA, Utah, Arizona, and Oregon are the 2 games that I think at night, Pac-12 after dark, are probably the games to really pay attention to, because Utah ranked 7th, Oregon ranked 6th. I think Arizona or UCLA, one of these 2 teams could potentially play spoiler tomorrow night and would effectively kick one of those 2 teams out of the running for the playoff. But we'll see. Are you going to be paying attention to those 2 games at all, or any specific players?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you hit it right on the head. I was gonna say it if you didn't, but I feel like this is just like spoiler territory right here, because UCLA, they've showed glimpses. I know they're not, where they thought they would be with Chip Kelly now, and I guess year 2 it is. But still, they're showing a little bit of steps. I won't say strides, but a little bit of steps of potential going forward. And of course, Arizona, we know they have the athletes to contend with Oregon. They just need to have the game plan overall to be Oregon, who's one of the hottest teams in all of football so far in college football at this moment, only losing to week 1 to Auburn. So this is definitely, I wouldn't be surprised if both Utah and Oregon came away here, but I definitely think that this is definitely the spoiler matchups of the evening, regardless of conference, regardless of teams, just overall on the college football schedule on Saturday. But just talking about Utah, this is the response. I'm not going to name drop everybody, but if you go to @SeniorBowl on Twitter, you will find absolutely everybody to watch in this football game, because the Senior Bowl went super heavy on Utah. Some people made the joke that it should be the North, the South teams, and then they just have a Utah squad by themselves. So there's a ton of Utah players in the Senior Bowl. So if you just go to @SeniorBowl on Twitter, you can find the guys to watch for. But of course, with Oregon, pretty much everybody on their offensive line, a very heavy senior-laden offensive line, but also a couple of underclassmen that we may be talking about next year at this time. Of Troy Dye, we're talking about Senior Bowl invites. I know we'll get into that in just a little bit, but he's also a linebacker for Oregon. A lot of potential there. So definitely a lot of guys in just Oregon and Utah in general to look at on Saturday night.
Yeah, Utah is loaded. It was Eric Elam who went out and said it. He writes for Yahoo Sports. He's a fantastic follow. But yeah,
great dude too.
Yeah, Francis Bernard, linebacker out of Utah, 6'1", 239. He's a senior. He's going to the Senior Bowl, of course, at least accepting his invite. Zach Moss, running back. We know he's my little child that I don't have, but he is phenomenal. Love him. Especially if he can stay healthy. You really get Ezekiel Elliott vibes if you watch him. I think so. Julian Blackman, safety out of Utah, 6'1", 187. We've talked highly of this Utah team multiple times. And if people remember, I have Utah in my Final Four for this season. So I am rooting for them all the way. I am hoping that Georgia loses this weekend, and I'm hoping somehow, some way Utah wins out and they value this Pac-12 championship and put Utah in there, because I would love to see like Utah versus Clemson. Maybe it wouldn't even be a close game, but I would love to see it. Or Utah, Ohio State. I think it would be phenomenal. And then they've also got Lee, I think I'm going to say this right, Lekai Photo, interior defensive lineman for Utah. The dude is 6'5", 325. He's ridiculously huge.
And he moves so well too.
Yes.
It's crazy. I mean, he's your he's your kind of stereotypical nose guard, but he plays more like a 3-4-5 technique on the defensive line because he's just that athletic. And I mean, like, the Star Lotulelei comparisons may come in there because Star was a freak athlete, in my opinion, in his first few seasons in Carolina. So I definitely think the comparison's justified, but the guy can move for his massive size.
Yeah, he really can. But moving to the Senior Bowl, we're already on the topic of it. So enough about the games for tomorrow. It's week 12. I think we kind of know who we need to be paying attention to at this point. But for the Senior Bowl, if you aren't paying attention to these guys, I mean, there's certainly been some names that have been dropping over the last couple of days. Notre Dame's had quite a good run. Khalid Kareem, edge rusher for them, accepted his invite. We talked about him in the preseason. We were very high on him. I was, at least. I really liked him. He's got good length. I think he's got a nice blend of speed to power. And I think he's still trying to figure out that length. I'm just going to let your rain just go ahead and do its thing.
Guy, is it that bad now?
Oh, it was bad right there. You're all calm about it. It was pretty bad right there. But it's all good. But Khalid Kareem, for me, is just a guy that I thought, going into the year was going to be a big riser. I think with the Senior Bowl, it's going to definitely happen with one-on-ones. Troy Bride, their cornerback, 5'11", 194, a little bit undersized, but I like, fluidity with his hips. I think he's got some ball skills as well. So we'll see what he can do in those one-on-ones. And then Chase Claypool out of Notre Dame, wide receiver, 6'4", 225. This guy's got size. I think, I don't want to say like Larry Fitzgerald, but like when you watch him line up, that like that's the size comparison for him. He's just a big-bodied receiver. I think he can play in the slot. I think he can play outside because he can get vertical. He's got good body control when he high points the football. So, Notre Dame had a great run. I don't know if there was anybody that you've seen in the last couple of days that really caught your eye. I know I kind of stole 3 from you, but is there any other names that we should be really paying attention to on this Senior Bowl list?
I think, a guy that I've thought very highly of, and I think we both did entering the preseason, he's just had an okay season. Alton Robinson, the defensive end out of Syracuse.
Yes.
He hasn't played poorly, I wouldn't say, but he hasn't taken that giant step forward as compared to some of his contemporaries in this class. So I think this is what the Senior Bowl's for. A week where, you have the physical skill set, you have the athleticism traits, this, that, and the other, but there's just a couple more things that you need to hone in, and you can kind of solidify maybe that top 100 status, whoever it may be. So I think Robinson, this is a perfect opportunity for him to kind of get back on track, play for him. Syracuse hasn't reached those expectations really set for them so far this year. And I think Robinson, with a solid week here at the Senior Bowl, if he can nail some of those interviews, I think he can really thrive in an environment like this because, again, I think a lot of physical traits are there. I think he can probably tune some things up in the run game. So it's going to be maybe a little difficult to see that at the Senior Bowl. But in the game itself, I think he can check boxes there. But I think Robinson, just overall where he was ranked coming into the year and where he is now, I think that's what the Senior Bowl is for, is to kind of maximize that potential that you had once going into the season.
Well, another edge rusher, by the way, and I just tweeted this out while you were talking all of that, but and I agree with you on Alton Robinson. I think he's tremendous story. I really think he's got a lot of upside. I think he could almost be like a Marcus Davenport type of climber with the one-on-ones and everything. But Bradley Anae just accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl. So that's another Utah defensive player. And Bradley Anae, great size, not great size, but like stout for his length at 6'3", 265. Just a workhorse for this defense, a captain of this defense, a leader, no doubt about it. So that's another defensive player. I believe that's 5 defensive players for Utah's defense and Zach Moss on offense. So it's going to be Utah heavy at the Senior Bowl. Another guy, though, Bradley Anae, again, really good player, really stout player. I think he could put his hand in the dirt. I think he could stand up. Whether you want to call it 3-4, 4-3, it doesn't matter. It's all hybrid fronts anymore, so it doesn't matter. But he's very talented. Another one of those guys that's got that speed to power. He's quick off the snap, and he is disruptive. So it's going to be a lot of fun, these one-on-ones. And I know I can't say his name, but your boy out of Auburn, he's 6'7", 305. I can't wait to see what he does against like a stout run defender like Anai, and then a guy like Khalid Kareem, just to be able to see how he manages that.
Yeah, Prince Tega Winogo comes over. He was playing defensive line at high school around the Montgomery area, so only came about an hour from school to come to Auburn. He has a Nigerian background, so he's still kind of learning the ways of football and everything. But for the fact that, he's been developing pretty much at left tackle for the past 2.5 years, and he's already has Senior Bowl entry, I think says a ton about his just mental capacity and just his physical ability. But he's a pretty athletic guy. I think he has to work on some leverage issues. Some hand placement is hit or miss. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's just inconsistent overall. But I think if you get a smart, cerebral offensive line coach to work with him and has a little bit of patience with him, I think he really could be a home run based on where he goes in the draft. Because I think right now I would value him at that 75 to 80 mark. And so with a good week at the Senior Bowl, I think he could really take off because dude's going to kill it in the interview process. He's a confident guy, but he definitely holds that captaincy at Auburn. And you'll see that when Senior Bowl week rolls around, because there's a lot of strong edge rushers here in this group. And I think overall you'll see his athleticism tested. And I think he'll meet the call.
For sure. And there's another name as well, Darrell Taylor out of Tennessee. We haven't really talked about him. Another one of those guys that's got, not the longest guy in the world, but like, a 6'3" edge rusher that is got, my mic just fell over. This has been a disaster of a podcast. And
it's okay. The rain, it's monsooning now, but it's fine. We're talking ball. I'm focused.
Yeah. Well, and then, we've got Jabari Zuniga as well. There is just a tremendous amount of defensive talent. And, Darrell Taylor, though, 6'4", 250, and he's a guy that's got, just great explosiveness. He's got, quick hands. I really like him. I think his ability to bend and get to the quarterback and run the arc is all there. And he's a guy that is certainly going to be another climber. So there's so many names in this list that, it's edge rusher heavy. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. It's definitely an event that you have to pay attention to. So you should follow the Senior Bowl on Twitter. Follow Jim Nagy as well on Twitter. He's a fantastic follow. But enough of the Senior Bowl. Let's get into last weekend and last night specifically. We'll end with last night's horrendous event of Myles Garrett and everything else. But last week, Tua, Joe Burrow, what was your take on this game, on this matchup? I think we're both in agreement. Joe Burrow is QB1.
Yeah, and he showed every ability of that in a hostile environment in crucial situations. And really, if you just have, your notebook and you're watching this game, it's really hard to point out anything that he did wrong or that's something that he can really work on. Sure, there was a couple throws that he floated, and maybe there was a couple decisions where it's like, well, maybe you should have checked down instead of forced this one. But at the end of the day, he was just on fire from start to finish. He showed his overall athletic ability, picked up some crucial first down runs on his feet, and then just his ability to pick apart what's normally perceived as a good secondary. Getting that to that third read and just dominating at all levels of the field. Burrow showed all his potential in that matchup, and he comes away as QB1 for me. And maybe it's at the expense of Tua Tagovailoa not playing outstanding and his ankle injuries continuing to be a theme. Tua wasn't horrible, but he wasn't great either. And I don't think you can blame all of his errors in that game on his ankle. I know it makes it a little difficult to plant your foot and deliver a consistent, accurate pass, but I think some of the decision-making wasn't really on par there that you're used to seeing from Tua, and maybe it was just a mind thing with his lower body injury. But at the end of the day, Burrow checked every single box necessary to meet that QB1 threshold. And, let's give him the Heisman and possibly a national championship trophy, because he's on track to really get all of that, plus be the first pick in the 2020 NFL draft.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, man, where like I wasn't expecting this at all. I don't think any of us were. And I mean, we knew he was a talented dude. Obviously, he was a highly touted, high school recruit and everything, but like you just were not expecting this. And the ball placement was really, really solid against Alabama. And he just, he had good anticipation. I mean, he was mobile. He was athletic in the pocket. And like, you don't have to say he's an athlete because I don't think he's like an athlete, but like he's not Lamar Jackson, but he is certainly somebody that with that type of mobility and that ability to maneuver in and around the pocket, it's important to have that. And you're going to face these, quick edge rushers, the fastest players on defenses everywhere. And he did a tremendous job. Tua, for sure, his ankle is going to be a concern, I think, going forward. These lower body ailments always come back and bite a player in the ass with what they need to do. And I think that's going to be the case. But last night, Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph, they had a brawl. Just inexcusable for Myles Garrett. We all know he's suspended for the rest of the year for the foreseeable future. What do you think should happen with Myles Garrett?
I mean, the NFL quickly did the right thing, suspending him for the rest of the year. And I don't know. It's hard because, a lot of times with instances like this, there's something to compare it to and be like, well, this suspension happened and it was justifiable, so we'll go to the drawing board and just make up something similar to that. We don't really have an instant anything like this. So it's hard to really compare a situation where, there was a retaliation and then, if we're not on a football field here and say somebody hit Mason Rudolph on the streets with a blunt object like that, we're talking about like charges being issued. So that's something else. It's like, I don't know really how you handle the situation, but so far I think they made the right move. Garrett suspended for the rest of the year. Pouncey, even though he was in defense of his quarterback, you can't kick somebody. I don't care if you have a helmet on or not. You can't do it. And so the 3 games is justified there. And Rudolph, I guess it's still wait to see what comes to be about that. But the whole stand of people saying, Mason Rudolph kind of deserved that. He started it. Well, look, like, you don't pinch your brother and then expect to get a brick thrown at your face in retaliation. That's what happened.
Right.
And so I get it. Like, sure, Mason Rudolph, did he deserve to get his face mask ripped off? Maybe so. But to actually have his helmet being used as a weapon in retaliation, that's not the right idea. So I understand the people that are like, Mason Rudolph did start it, and maybe he did. Maybe there was a build-up to that situation because the game was kind of just a gross, yucky game anyway. So there's just some frustration building up there. But at the end of the day, Myles Garrett, you got to keep your emotions in check. And he just didn't. And I think there's a lot of responsibility there in a sense from him and his coach and even his quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, at times during the game, Mason Rudolph was getting hit in the head. He was obviously frustrated with his play. He threw 4 interceptions. He was god awful, but like, it's inexcusable. No doubt about it for Myles Garrett. You can't swing and hit your helmet. It's something you learn at an extremely young age too. Like, don't swing your helmet. Don't hit anybody in the head with your helmet. And he went about and did it. Props to Pouncey for stepping in like that. If you have not seen the video, you can check it out on my Twitter page at Russ NFL Draft. I do have the video on there. It's an unfortunate way for the game to end. It was an unfortunate way for that to all happen. And if that's the way, I know there's people that want Myles Garrett suspended from the NFL forever. If that's the way it's going to be, then that's very unfortunate in my opinion. Because he's so talented, and you want to obviously see him in the NFL for the foreseeable future. But I hate to see a guy lose his career potentially for something like this. So we'll see how it all plays out. Wild, crazy way to end week or to start week 11 of the NFL. Week 11, week 12. Which week is it? 11?
I think 11. I'm not really sure. I'm really bad when it comes to that.
Yeah, I know it's week 12 in college football, and right now that's all that matters because we got college football tomorrow. We even have a little bit on tonight. So you, my friend, thank you for joining me in a rainstorm for this edition of Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. You guys, of course, can follow CP on Twitter @_Christian Page. You can, of course, follow me as well at Russ NFL Draft. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast. I promise we won't be doing these shows in rainstorms very often.
Fingers crossed.
yeah, fingers crossed, but it's just one of those things that happen for today. But either way, thank you, my man, for joining me. You guys enjoy week 12 of college football. We'll be back next week to talk more NFL draft. But until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.